Good morning, Chairman.
Morning, everybody. Welcome to OSMB, or Review and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Robert Parker, as you know. I'm Chair of the Board. Can I also welcome all members and officers here this morning? The video feed, as usual, of this meeting is being broadcast via the County Council website. Can I also welcome any members of the press and public who are watching our meeting on Teams online today? Specific welcome I was going to say to Councillor Martin Hill, but I think that he may be joining us later. He's the leader of the council. I was also going to welcome Richard Bootroyd. Councillor Mark Whittington is joining us online, and I think Councillor Hilton Spratt was going to be here, but it's away. So that's who we might be expecting today. I'd also like to welcome to our meeting two of our Chief Officers, Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive, and Andrew Crookham, Executive Director for Resources. As usual, I want to begin with a health and safety announcement. There's no fire drill planned for today, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, we do need to leave the council chamber as usual through the doors at the back of the behind us all, and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We can then wait in the car park for further instructions. Can I also remind everyone, as usual, to ensure mobile phones and devices are on silent. Also, when invited to speak, can you please ensure you switch on your microphone? Otherwise, those attending the meeting on Teams and members of the press and public listening to our meeting online won't be able to hear us. Please be aware you need to speak directly into the microphones to be heard. If you want to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand, and the Vice Chair, Councillor Tom Smith, will make a note of those who wish to speak. Okay, so that's gone through the rituals. Can we now move to the agenda for today's meeting? Item 1, apologies for absence and replacement members. Emily, do we have any apologies or replacement members?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Kendrick, and we have Councillor Gray as a replacement. And we've received apologies from Councillor Mrs Brockway, and we have Councillor Sear as a replacement.
Thank you. That's item 1. Declarations of councillors' interest. Members of the Review and Scrutiny Management Board are reminded they only need to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared on the declaration of pecuniary interest forms, which we all fill in. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No. Okay, so we move now to item 1, minutes of the meeting of the 29th of September. This is to confirm, excuse me, that the minutes as presented to us starting on page 5 are indeed correct, and if we agree that, then I'll sign them as a true record. So if we move to page 5, anybody want to comment on accuracy for page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14. No comments? So, do I have a proposer and seconder on the minutes? Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Pepper. And, yep, thank you, Councillor Brooks. So, we've got a proposer and seconder. Can we now vote on the minutes? We're voting as to whether or not we agree, or you agree, that the minutes are a correct record. All those in favour, please indicate. Any abstentions? Thank you. Any voting against? Okay. Thank you. That's the minutes agreed. Okay. If we now move to item 4, announcements by the Chair, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers, I just want to begin by saying that today's meeting would have been the last one for Councillor Alex Sayer, one of our parent governor representatives, as her current term of office ends on the 2nd of November. On behalf of the board, I'd like to record our thanks to Alex for her time, involvement and the contributions she's made. And I will be dropping her a note to say that to put that into practice. An election process for a parent governor representative for the next 4 year period will be commencing shortly. Okay. On a similar line, when it comes to added members, Democratic Services has been advised by the Diocese of Lincoln that the Reverend Philip Johnson is no longer the church representative. Reverend Johnson was appointed as a church representative added member to our board back in November 2017. On behalf of the board, I'd also like to record our thanks to Reverend Johnson for his time and commitment over the last 5 years, and a replacement member is now being identified by the Diocese of Lincoln, and I'll be also in turn writing to the Reverend Johnson to thank him for his time. Okay, so we now move on to, in terms of announcements, to the Executive Councillor announcements. Anybody want to bring on behalf of the Executive Councillors announcements from Councillor Hill? We'll wait and see if he comes.
Councillor Whittington is on Teams.
Councillor Whittington, have you got anything to comment, Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I've not been notified by Councillor Hill of anything. Thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Boothroyd, Executive Council People Management, isn't here. Okay, thank you. So, if we now move on to Chief Officer's announcements. Debbie, anything to tell us?
Thank you very much. The only thing that I'd just really like to make the committee aware of is that we've recently welcomed just under 200 asylum-seeking families and single females into a hotel in Stoke Rochford. Councillor Hill, the leader of the council, did write to South Kesteven District Council local authority councillors to make them aware. There have been some challenges with regard to the hotel and the Home Office provider in terms of welcoming those families, but I did escalate it to the Home Office on Friday, and we are working through those issues, and I'm feeling much more confident about our ability to settle and welcome those families into the area than we were last week.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Do we see that sort of work that's going on, valuable and important as it is, being looked at in any way through our scrutiny arrangements? And perhaps, if not, perhaps it could be considered by the Senior Management Board.
Yeah, there is a migration partnership that's chaired by North Kesteven as the North Kesteven District Council as the lead, because obviously it's a coordination responsibility with health, the local authorities across the two tiers having key responsibilities to make sure that we can welcome the vast range of programmes, because there are a number of migration programmes happening. There is also an East Midlands Migration Board, but actually I think it is a really good point in terms of looking at how we welcome those families from a scrutiny point of view. So happy to take that offline, Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Okay, anything anybody wants to raise about what Debbie said? No, can we move on to Andrew? Andrew, Director of Resources. Anything that you want to bring to our attention?
No, nothing from me today, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. If we now move on to item 5, consideration of call-ins. Emily, do you have any call-ins to consider?
No, none received, Chairman.
Okay. Still on the floor, Emily, item 6, consideration of council calls for action.
None received.
None received,
Sorry.
thank you. So, that's the administration dealt with. If we deal now with the substantive items on the agenda, starting with item 7, which is Transformation Programme Update. We're getting a report from, which has already been circulated, from Jane Madison, Interim Transformation Programme Manager. Andrew McLean, Assistant Director, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. So the report provided today gives you an overview and a recap of the transformation programme as a whole, and I'm accompanied today by Jane Madison, but also colleagues from Children's Services, Tara Jones and Matt Clayton, who are going to provide a presentation on the Children in Care project within the programme, as agreed at the last board. Now, the transformation programme currently has 9 wide-ranging programmes of focus. A very brief summary of these is provided at pages 17 and 18 of your packs, and a more detailed overview at Appendix A, which also includes those high-level benefits that each project seeks to deliver. Now, the programme is reviewed regularly to ensure it's still focusing on some of our key priorities within the corporate plan, with new activities coming into the individual programmes and some projects moving into what we would call a legacy status as they transition back into business as usual services. So of these so far, we've seen our work on the intranet, also the special educational needs reforms, which we brought to this board on the 16th of December last year, and also the Adults Improvement and Development Project, which we presented to the board on the 24th of March. Now, strong governance and oversight has been a key feature since the beginning of the programme. Each project has its own governance and reporting arrangements in place and is led by a senior officer in the council and supported by key stakeholders and project support. There's also a steering group that's made up of lead officers from across IT, finance, HR, audit, policy, business support and also comms. And we meet regularly to review and evaluate the developments across the programme overall to ensure it's still on track. And that will include looking at matters such as business cases for new projects, but also evaluating the impact of new developments and also considering any impact on the resources that we've got within the council to meet those requirements, where there may be constraints or decisions needed on certain priorities. There's also a dedicated regular reporting into our corporate leadership team, where key decisions and direction is provided, along with routine reporting with our executive councillors and, of course, the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Now, in addition, the transformation programme is specifically evaluated by our internal audit and features as part of the Council's annual assurance plan. Page 19 of the pack provides a flavour of some of those benefits from the transformation programme so far, and then Appendix A goes into detail from each project within the programme of some of the output and outcome-focused benefits. And a key part of this transformation programme has been to focus on what those benefits are, to make sure we're able to track them and go back to ensure that they're realised. Now, these are different for each project, so we have to take a different approach depending on the nature of the project. Some of those output or quantitative benefits, such as budget savings, cost avoidance, cost savings, or specific performance metrics are easier to track, whereas some of those outcome or qualitative benefits can be harder to track as it can be subjective, and in many cases we work very closely with the relevant service areas as part of their overall approach to quality management to ensure that we can assure that the benefits are being realised. We also work closely with our internal audit, who, as I say, sit part of our steering group and feedback on that benefits assurance approach. So I think that provides an overview and recap of the programme. And would you like to take questions now on that first part of the report before handing over to colleagues to give the focus on the Children in Care project?
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the report. I noticed what you say about the list on page 17, 18, and then that there's details of each in the a page on each a bit later on, but I can't see any detail on devolution. And I just sort of wondered why, and I just ask, is it appropriate that we should get an update on what's happening with devolution and the proposals to this board? Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to take that?
Okay, I'll provide the update as Councillor Dilks has requested, and then Andrew may want to talk about what's in the report. But so where we are at the moment is that obviously I think it's a number of months ago, and I can't remember which Secretary of State it was, but the Secretary of State announced, I think it was 9 in terms of potential 9 devolution deals. And obviously East Midlands involving Nottinghamshire, Nottingham City, Derby and Derbyshire and Derby City have obviously been one of the forerunners to that 9 in terms of their devolution deal. Clearly, we are working with the 10 councils across Greater Lincolnshire, so including the 2 unitaries to the north, for a Greater Lincolnshire devolution deal. We've developed some asks in terms of what we would want to ask government for powers to be able to decide locally, and we've consulted with businesses on that. We have also worked with the 10 districts about a sort of vision document, have these sort of overriding strategy in terms of where we want Lincolnshire or Greater Lincolnshire to be in the long term, and therefore work out which powers we want to achieve and we want to be able to deliver locally, so that we can have much more decision making and much more autonomy, and therefore much more investment to be able to decide locally what we want to do for Greater Lincolnshire. Obviously, we wait to see what will happen in terms of the timeline for the next tranche. Originally, the timeline was for a sort of May announcement for the next tranche. We are hearing through the MPs that that is unlikely, and therefore the timeline is likely to be much further down the track, which I'm sure won't surprise this committee. I'm currently got a number of meetings scheduled with the district council chief execs, because we want to make sure that the vision document is appropriately aligned with the prospectus and the ask from government. We also understand that there are a couple of other devolution announcements for other areas to be made, and we want to look at what their asks are to make sure that we get the best deal for Greater Lincolnshire and don't miss out on any opportunities that perhaps somebody else has put in their ask. So we want to cross-reference around that. Clearly, we want to work with the districts around some principles around governance and how we would work together. I think once we've completed that work, which will probably be towards the end of this year or the new year, then I think that would be then the time to look at bringing those proposals when we've got them a bit more advanced. But that's where we currently are.
Okay. I suppose just to follow up on the missing, it's definitely something's happened at some point. We'll, if it's okay, because it's on the page 22 at the summary going into that. So straight after this meeting, we can get that shared, perhaps with Tracy, so it can be shared with that included. It's in the file, but I'm not sure what's happened as part of the transition over. So we can have that shared so it can be updated.
That would be good. Okay. Are you happy with that, Phil, or do you want to...
Not really. I would say thank you to the Chief Executive for that update. But I just wondered whether it should actually be in the report. There should be something in this report. But certainly, I mean, that's happened. But certainly, could I ask that, you know, next time we get the transformation update, that devolution is, you know, it's listed here as being important, and we're told there's the benefits and the costs and all the rest of it. But we haven't actually got that as a report, and it just seems a bit of an omission, if I could put it that. So could we as a committee or as a board ask for that in future? I think what the recommendation is that we ask for, you know, what we would like in future, and can I suggest that that is something that we do ask for, so that, you know, we know that the council knows, you know, how things are proceeding on the devolution front.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We have had a discussion before this meeting about how, if we turn to page 18, we can see the list of all of the areas that is subject to what we might call the investigation or being looked at. The People's Strategies, Smarter Working Programme, and yes, devolution is on there. The question then is, where is it most appropriate for those individual ideas, like children in care, for example, to be dealt with? Should it be dealt with in the Parents Committee, which is Children's Services, with an overview from Overview and Scrutiny Management Board? Certainly devolution is an item that should be coming to this particular committee. And I take your point that's been raised, and I'm sure that we will arrange for a report to be brought to this committee pretty quickly. I would like to ask a question in the same context as devolution, in the context of not just local government reorganisation, but the implementation of devolution in relation to the next election, which is due in 2025. And I'm just interested in what you might call the representation element of devolution. In other words, councils continuing to exist and council elections taking place. And I wonder if we've got any knowledge from past experience of other councils going through devolution processes to help us with what we think is going to be in 2025 a major year for elections. And I wondered if you knew anything about that, Debbie.
Thank you very much. I'll just come back to Councillor Dilk's points, if that's okay, and then come on to this point. So the way that we proposed to report the transformation programme is do a summary of all of the projects and then do a deep dive on one. At the pre-meet, talking to the Chairman, Councillor Parker, given the role of the Parent Scrutiny Committee, we felt that we perhaps needed to re-look at how we scrutinise the transformation programme strategically here, whilst the parent committee then looks at the individual projects, albeit that there will be some projects in here where OSMB is actually the parent committee. So I think we need to go away, take that away, look at doing a bit of a schedule about when we'll do a deep dive on each of them, recognising the request from this committee that devolution is one that you want sooner rather than later on that schedule, and then come back at the next committee around that. So I'll come back on that, Councillor Dilks. In relation to the next election point, Councillor Parker, obviously the legislation hasn't yet gone through, and we don't know what changes will be made to the legislation yet. So it could be a moving picture, or there may not be any changes to the current legislation around the Levelling Up Bill. As it stands at this moment in time, subject to obviously no changes to the proposed legislation around the Levelling Up White Paper, which obviously we don't know, so lots of caveats in that. From what we know at the moment is that the Levelling Up Bill and devolution separates out local government reorganisation and the creation of any other mechanism to receive powers from national government. So, in essence, the way that it stands at the moment is that the 10 councils continue to deliver their duties. They would continue to deliver their political mandate, and they would continue with the elections, and their duties would not change. The new duties, potentially on a tier 3 deal, and not all of them would be tier 3, but on a tier 3 deal, the new duties would come down from government into the mayoral combined authority. Now, notwithstanding that, there have been some incidences where they have wanted to align the elections for a mayor and the local government elections, which have led the local elections slipping to align them. So there is precedent that has happened as well. But obviously, us not been on the list yet, it's difficult to sort of scenario plan in terms of what the potential timelines would be. We could guess if we were in, tier 2, tranche 2, tranche 3, tranche 4, but we don't yet know when the next tranche will be.
Okay. Has that prompted any more questions of interest? Okay. No. Can we move on to the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So just to place the Children Care Transformation Programme into context, Children's Services, as you know, is an outstanding local authority, but we don't sit back. We continue to look at how we can improve outcomes for children and families. During the pandemic, our children in care numbers rose slightly, and that was because there were less children exiting care because of some delays within the judiciary system. What we also saw was a bit of a change in terms of our availability of in-house residential placements and foster care placements for children. That's because some foster carers were isolating because they had vulnerable children in placement, and some foster carers chose to reconsider their career in light of personal circumstances and changes. All of our internal residential homes are full to capacity and are always running at 100% occupancy. And so what we saw for the first time was a much younger cohort of children being placed out of county in external placement provision, both residential and fostering provision. The national market is volatile in terms of external placements. You may have read that within the care review. They come at a very high cost and not necessarily providing the same outcomes as we do within our own in-house provision. So the Children in Care transformation was developed to respond to those challenges, both in terms of improving outcomes for children, but also achieving financial sustainability for the council. So I won't wish to go through the key strategic aims. You've seen the 3 key strategic aims of the Children in Care Transformation Programme. I'll move on a little bit more in terms of our specific challenges during the pandemic. So as I said, we saw an increased number of children in care. However, we benchmarked very well against the national average. Our children in care per 10k is still lower than the national average and our statistical neighbours. As I said, the external market is volatile. That's resulting in a significant rise in the cost of externally commissioned placements. So just as a comparison, an average weekly cost of a placement externally can be anything from around 12,000 a week. Our average of the Lincolnshire placements of children in externally commissioned providers is 4,663 per week. When you look at our in-house residential, that is much lower at just over £2,000 per week. So you can see the more children that are placed out of county, the much higher cost for the council. As I said, LCC's internal residential capacity is limited at 100% occupancy, and the foster care age profile in the county means that there's a bit of reducing capacity. And the do nothing trajectory, if we did nothing, indicates continued significant cost pressure for the council. So we worked with key stakeholders and children and families and staff to look at the key work streams sitting under the Children in Care Transformation Programme. We didn't just want to focus on children in care, but actually what we wanted to do is start at that really early help as well, to prevent children's needs escalating and then needing to come into statutory services. So you'll see we've got our early help work stream. We've also got our residential estates expansion work stream. Value in Care work stream. Value in Care is a new approach which looks at identifying needs and strengths of children and actually what we all need to be doing, both our partners, external partners and internally, to support those needs and ensure those needs reduce and they have the right care around them. Also our Rethink Fostering, which is about how can we maximise on recruitment and retention of foster carers, and also looking at the core offer of support. So, looking at the programme impact so far, so we commenced this work back in October 2020, so just around the 2-year mark now. So we launched our new early help strategy last year. That's the first early help strategy that has actually been co-produced with our key partners. So with education, with health, with police, etc. It's now got really strong governance arrangements around it. We've got an early help steering group where we have partner agencies sitting on that steering group, and also that steering group has to report regularly to the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership. We are seeing our external lead professionals, particularly schools. They are the lead professionals for a number of Team Around the Child, which is our really early help support for children. So it's been embedded very well, the strategy. We've developed a strategic placement panel and a placement tracker where we track every single child that's placed in externally commissioned placement. We challenge providers around rising cost if they're not meeting need. And that also looks at opportunities to be able to bring children back into in-house placements, or actually reunification, placing back with their parents or their extended family when it's safe to do so. We've launched a one placement referral forms. Every time a child needs a placement out of county or internally, it will go either to our internal placements duty desk or to LCC commissioning's placements. We've strengthened that with a one referral form. We've improved our children's profiles that go along with the referral form, and that's saving social workers time, and it's resulting in better quality referrals. We're changing the culture with social workers so that they're thinking, once the child is placed out of county, they're actually thinking about trajectories to bring those children back. And they're using the value in care tool approach to inform that trajectory planning. And again, as I said, the revision of all the children's profiles that go out to external providers, then focusing upon strengths and needs as opposed to behaviours and risk. So in terms of the financial impact of the programme, since June 2021, we have transitioned 45 children and young people back from externally commissioned placements into an in-house placement or returned those children home. And that's an actual cost avoidance to the council of just over £5 million. We have had a large capital programme in terms of the construction of 2 new children's homes. Our first children home, which will be Robin House, which is due to open in January 2023. And then work will commence on Friday for our brand new build children's residential home in Louth, and that is due to open in October 2023. We've already profiled a number of children from the out-of-county placements that are due to return to Robin House in January. So that will be another 4 children that will return in county. And those 2 new additional children's homes are forecast to secure savings of £500,000 each year, and those savings have been built into the council's financial plan. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Questions? Okay, Councillor Dilks. Phil.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the report. I really welcome it. I mean, I don't think there can be anything more important. You know, we are constantly, I hope, having it drummed into us that these children are our children, children in care, and that we as county councillors are responsible for their well-being and making sure they get the right opportunities. So I really welcome. I think what I'm really asking is probably for more information and perhaps something that you might provide after the meeting. 2 things I'm sort of interested in is the fostering challenges that you mentioned. I remember some years ago when I was previously on this council asking and got involved with a couple who were trying to, a constituent who'd had some difficulty with the fostering experience, if I could put it that way. And I was really shocked to learn at that stage, many years ago, perhaps 10, 15 years ago, that the allowance that we actually paid to foster carers was actually less than the allowance that I received as a county councillor for taking what we know can be very difficult children sometimes and challenging children. And I sort of kind of looked into that, and I think it did get raised at some point after that. So I kind of wondered where we were on that sort of platform, you know, in comparison with other councils, and really, I probably how much, you know, how does it compare to the allowance that we all get as county councillors? That was one thing, and then secondly, it was really sort of measuring some of the, you know, I find it really difficult to see how well are we doing with children in care. And one of the measures I previously looked at, again going back many years, was I remember asking, perhaps at a meeting similar to this, how many of these 500 and odd children, I think it was about 515 children we had in care at the time, how many of them get the same opportunities that my children get? For example, how many of them, I think I asked how many of them go to grammar school. I don't actually believe in selective education, but if if that's seen as they should get equal opportunity, in my view. But then I always remember asking, how many children in our care, actually go to university? And the response I got, and I'm sure we have moved on since, but the response I got was, Councillor Dilks, these are very challenging children. And when I pressed it, I was told, actually, we did have one child who went to university from care, but it didn't really work out. Now, I think I'm really asking, how have we moved on? And how many now get that opportunity that my children had? Because, I just think that's one of the ways we can sort of measure how well are we doing.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Right, thanks for that, Phil. Two parts to the question.
Thank
Off
you.
you go.
Thank you. Yeah, we've certainly come a long, long way in respect of fostering in Lincolnshire. So in terms of the finances, the National Fostering Network set a minimum standard that all local authorities should be paying in terms of an allowance for the care of the children. And Lincolnshire is always, their allowances are always set at that national rate. In addition, we recognise that some children might have additional needs, and therefore they may need additional support, both financial support and practical support, to assist them in caring for that child. So yes, there is a wide range of financial opportunities for foster carers. In terms of the recruitment campaign, we have an always-on recruitment campaign. It's much easier now to go through that assessment process. There were new national minimum standards for fostering introduced some time ago, which shortened the timescale for that assessment. So I recall it used to take sometimes up to a year, many years ago, but we do have a 6-month timescale now. In terms of the opportunities that children in care have, as a local authority, we absolutely take our corporate parenting responsibilities serious, and we champion every single child in care to be the best that they can. That might be education, and we have a very proactive virtual school who champion those children in education settings. We do have a number of care leavers that have gone on to university and to further education. I haven't got those figures with me now, but I can certainly get them to you. In terms of other opportunities, we absolutely encourage involvement in positive activities, leisure activities that you would want for your own children. So we've got a very proactive corporate parenting panel, a children in care council. So we're really eliciting children's views on a regular basis about the care that they receive, so that we can change the way that we deliver services, or if there needs to be further support in another area, that we certainly provide that. Thank you.
Okay, Phil?
Yes. Can I just say thank you ever so much for that? Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I would welcome, further information as and when. But thank you.
Yeah. Could I pick up on your answers? The first one is in relation to university education. You said you'd let us have those figures. Could you also let us have what the figures are by comparison with children who are not in care?
Yes, certainly.
And secondly, in relation to the fostering rate that was quoted by Councillor Dilks, you mentioned that Lincolnshire's rate is at the national minimum rate that's set. Okay. But what about other local authorities? What is, in comparison to what we might call our parent or similar councils, are they paying more? Because yes, we're paying the minimum rate, but other councils may be paying a higher rate, and whether or not that makes any difference is pretty important.
Yes, so every year the fostering network they set a rate, and it goes up with inflation, etc., and we add that as well. Most councils that I am aware of use the fostering network standard rate as their allowance. Some local authorities have different schemes. We certainly have scheme in terms of allowances here for more for children whose needs are greater than others, and as I said, may need additional support for their needs. So we have allowances such as specific child rate, which is higher, and we also have some other schemes such as our remand schemes, which for children on remand that actually attracts a higher rate of allowance in recognition of the work that the carers have to do in terms of supporting that child and improving outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to raise any? Yep, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to throw a couple of things in, if I might. I attended a meeting with Inspire Education Group in Stamford yesterday, and I know Debbie just had copied into a super letter from one of their learners, if you like, saying how if it wasn't for the support that they got there, they wouldn't have been able to go to university. I can't remember the figures of children in university. It is one handful, but it is there, and the children are going. Councillor Dilts mentioned corporate parenting and looking after the children. Andrew Morris, the corporate parenting manager, and myself have emailed all district councils leaders asking that we can do a presentation about the responsibility of every district council, which have the same responsibility as we as county councillors for cared for children. I've had some responses back already. We're offering to go and do a briefing with the leaders and with the senior officers, and we're also saying we recognise that come May there's going to be some changes of councillors at district councils and at Boston and at City of Lincoln, and saying that we're happy to prepare induction, if you like, for new councillors about corporate parenting. As far as the foster children are concerned, it comes up at corporate parenting panel quite often. The money offered by private fostering companies is crazy. It's something we can't compete with on a direct amount of money payment. But my understanding is where we really do win is the support that we give our foster carers. We give, there are all sorts of things in place, that they have their own groups, and we give extra support over and above what would normally be expected. So from a corporate parenting panel, we're aware of what's happening, and we're working well, hopefully, to help from the Children's Services side. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Councillor Hill's joined us. I just wanted people to be aware of that. He's on Teams. Okay, could I go back to the financial savings? Okay, and I don't know whether you'll be able to handle this, but the budget savings are quoted, cost avoidance is quoted. Okay, and from page 23 onwards, at the bottom of each sheet, there is budget savings of X, and it carries on all the way through. But there isn't a time period. And I'm just interested in which financial years they've been shown. And secondly, in relation to cost avoidance, I would imagine that the cost avoidance figure of £5.193 million is a gross figure as opposed to a net figure, because yes, we've avoided paying that, but those particular work that was done hasn't stopped completely and utterly, and it's all been saved. So that's two questions. One in relation to the savings of 10.951 million, which is quoted as a consequence of adding up all the simple amounts. And then secondly, the question of what is the net savings compared to the gross savings of 5.19 million?
Do apologise. These savings were achieved in 2021 and 2022, and also so far this year savings, which amount to the £5.1 million. In terms of what we were set at, to reduce the overspend on the out-of-county placements over three years. So we've still got another year to go in the programme to achieve further savings. In terms of it being cost avoidance, we are still getting new starters into the out-of-county placements. That can't always be avoided. So if we hadn't have achieved all these children returning back into out-of-county placements, the out-of-county budget would be overspending that additional £5.1 million overspend.
You can't say, it doesn't have to be answered here, but I'm interested in knowing the difference between the 5.193 million cost avoidance and what we actually had to spend in order to provide some sort of services, because it wouldn't have gone from cost avoidance of 5 million to nothing being spent. So perhaps outside of this meeting you could let us know.
Yes, I certainly will, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Macy. Oh, sorry, Debbie, you wanted to come in on the
I
same.
can probably help, but not being an accountant, I may not be able to answer the question directly. We do have one to my left, actually. So because of COVID and then because of additional children going into placement, external placements, we done some work and looked at a reasonable percentage of those children that we would want to return back into Lincolnshire. Clearly, there are some young people that are settled in their placement that you wouldn't want to disrupt the placement, but there are some children out of that cohort that you would want to bring back into county and have them much more local to you. That was calculated to be an overspend of about 6 million that we would be able to bring back in over 3 years. The executive agreed to fund that from one-off contingency funding, and so that money has gone back into the budget on an understanding that that 6 million will then come out of the budget over a 3-year period. To complicate things, though, that obviously we then clearly are getting new recruits into the care system, clearly wanting to place much more into Lincolnshire and in our own homes as we build those, but sometimes external placements are unavoidable. The national rate of looked after children increase is about 5%. We're never at the national increase, we're always lower than the increase, so we've worked the increase in terms of the budget pressures moving forward at sort of 3%. And so it is, I can't answer the gross net, I'm going to look to Andrew for that, but it's around, on the one hand, the budget getting back into track by having that additional £6 million over a 3-year period, which will then come out, but recognising the cost pressures, which are projected to be at a 3% increase. And again, we've cut that across some fostering, some in-house residential and some external placements, is how it looks operationally, but I'll ask the accountant to respond to the other issue.
I think you've answered it pretty well, like an accountant almost, Debbie, to be honest, so fair play. No, I think I haven't got the budget documents with me here, but it'd be best describing them with the aid of them, and I guess when we come back to the budget proposals in January, February time, it'll be easy to explain that. So if we can make a note of drilling into that as part of the scrutiny of it, because it would be easy to explain it. But we've got various different lines in the children's services budget that can help demonstrate it. But I think the main bit for me is when you're obviously trying to forecast a medium-term financial plan, and Tara touched upon it, is that we tend to look at all of our demand-driven services in gross terms, because we need to factor in how our costs and our various cost bases are going to increase over the period of the financial plan, and the children's one is a prime example of that. The do-nothing trajectory of growth in children's numbers is essentially, in some respects, that round about that £5 million, the do-nothing, and therefore the actions that the team have been taking over the past 18 months to 2 years have been into eating that, and otherwise we'd have a bigger structural gap of that figure is the basic explanation of it. And and it's similarly deployed in the adult care world as well. I know when Chris and Glenn have been to talk to us before, and again in the various committees that's discussed, it's the same sort of principle. Do nothing, our budget gap is a lot bigger.
I can accept that totally, and I'm not going to say but straight afterwards. What I am saying, though, is that we know what the cost avoidance figure is, but as the point I was trying to make is that, yes, we've avoided paying this amount of money for these children for this particular reason, but we don't then go to zero from cost avoidance. And I'm just asking for some sort of what we might call visibility on how much did we have to pay, because if the cost avoidance figure is quoted precisely, then the replacement of that particular form of delivery of service could be even bigger. Could be. I don't know if it would be, but what are we comparing it to? It's great to save cost avoidance of 5.193 million. How much did it cost to do an equivalent, better service?
So ideally, in terms of the step up, if you like, and therefore the step back, ideally, if children need to be removed, we want to keep them in a family placement, if at all possible, and we would seek to place them with a family member. That has a cost, and I'm sure Tara will be able to tell me the average cost in a minute of the first one, which would be to place with a family member. If a family member is unable or unable safely to care for that child, then we would want to place a child in Lincolnshire as near to their community as possible, so they can continue their schooling, continue to have all of their, their friendship group, access their leisure facilities in a foster care environment. If a foster care environment cannot meet the needs of that child because of the complexity of their needs, then we would need to put them into a residential provision, and we would seek to place them in a residential provision as near to their community as possible, so they retain their, their friendship links and their school links. And if the local placements are either not available or the needs are too complex, we would then seek to look at an out-of-county placement. And some out-of-county placements are in-county. We just refer to them as out-of-county because they're not controlled by Lincolnshire County Council, they're third-party providers. Some are in-county, but most of them are out-of-county. And I suppose in terms of cost, you go up that escalation as well. So the first step down would be back into our residential and then back into fostering. And then if possible, as we stabilise the behaviour, it may be that a family carer can then look after. And obviously it gets more expensive as you go up that gradient and then less expensive as you go down the gradient.
Totally understand that, very clear. But how much? Because we've been very precise in, that's my point. And I feel as though this has perhaps gone on a bit longer than it needed to. But outside this meeting, I'd like to know something about how we're able to say precisely that we have avoided paying 5.193 million but aren't available just at the moment, have been saying, and the reduced cost was X. I thought, okay, yeah, Councillor Macy, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on the Our Challenges section. There's mention that there was increased numbers of children in care during the pandemic. What I'd like to know is, have we considered that now with the cost of living, bills going up and so on, that there might be the possibility that parents feel they can no longer look after their own child and then have to place it in care because they have not got that affordability anymore?
Yes, absolutely right. We did see a slight increase in our children care numbers during the pandemic, but a lot of it was around us not exiting so many children from care. There was some, as we try to manage with sort of hybrid court meetings, etc., there was some delay in finalising children's court orders, which meant that kind of we weren't exiting them, but we were having a slight increase in children care numbers. We've somewhat stabilised over the last, say, 6 months. They've kept around between 730 and 735, and we haven't gone above that at the moment. However, what we have done is profiled that increase in percentage in terms of a cost and demand trajectory, because we are still feeling some of the impact of the pandemic in terms of mental health and also in terms of the impact in terms of the financial climate on families will no doubt mean that we have some children that have to come through into statutory services, you know, despite a very, very comprehensive early help offer. So which is why, as Debbie said earlier, we've profiled that percentage increase.
Okay, yep. Phil, Councillor Dulles.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for allowing me to come back with, possibly in light of the discussion that we've sort of been having, which I kind of welcome. I wouldn't want the opportunity to go by without raising at least, whilst we're looking at sort of transformation of you know, in what's happening with children, our children in care, and we talked about, you know, external providers and the rest of it, and I understand all that. But I really have great concerns about other people's children in care, not this county's, but other counties and local authorities putting their children into the care of businesses who are opening up houses with 3 or 4 children placements in those houses and getting planning permission to do it. Particularly in my area in South Kesteven, I was on the planning authority, and we see these coming up quite regularly now. People buying houses, you know, and change of use for a children's home. Now these are, you know, as I say, authorities out. It's not our problem, but it is within Lincolnshire. It's something that's happening in Lincolnshire. I often wonder if these places, you know, if they are the best placement for those children, particularly when it's big cities. You know, I think of Birmingham, for example. You know, taking a child out of the centre of Birmingham and placing them in a real remote part of Lincolnshire. And then actually some of these businesses actually have their own schools, which are miles and miles away from the community in which the children are actually placed. And that concerns me as well. So not just as a member of a planning authority, but as a member of this authority, it worries me. And is it something that we are concerned about? And, you know, how are we sort of tackling that problem if it is perceived as a problem? Thank you. And I'd like some, you know, is it possible to get some numbers? Or, you know, am I just sort of, is it a perception that's wrong that I'm getting? Is it a matter of concern? Should it be?
So, is it on our radar? Sorry? Is it on our radar is the question?
Yes, definitely. So Lincolnshire, as you said, Councillor Dilks, and particular issue in your district area as well, is what we would call a net importer of looked after children. So these numbers aren't right, they're ballpark. The last time I looked at them is that we would have about 800 children placed in Lincolnshire from other local authorities, whereas we would tend to place other children in local authorities at about 40 or 50 would be our sort of numbers. So you can see that we are a net importer. As Councillor Dilks has said, as a local authority, we do not have responsibility for them because it is the placing local authority that retains parental responsibility, so they are responsible. Albeit, they often end up in our schools. Clearly, if there's antisocial behaviour, then clearly the police have an input and clearly they access local health services. So from a local authority children's social care perspective, we don't have a responsibility, but obviously it does have an impact on other local authorities. The reality is nationally is that there is a significant shortage of residential placements for children who are in care. It is a national challenge, and I think I would go as far as to say, and certainly the Association of Directors of Children's Services would say that it's a national crisis in terms of local authorities desperately needing residential placement and unable to get them. And so those local authorities that don't have in-house provision or as much in-house provision as us clearly are desperate for places, and whilst every local authority would want to place a child as near to their community as possible, if there's nothing available, the child's not safe at home, they need to make a decision and place a child wherever they can place a child. Clearly the issue around it being out of county has been raised nationally. Clearly, a lot of lobbying to the department around lack of provision, which has resulted in us getting funding for to build our in-house provision, and that will be happening across the country. But demand just cannot keep up with supply in relation to residential provision at a national scale. Certainly, it is on our radar. It's on everybody's radar, but that the legislation remains firm, quite rightly in my view, that the placing local authority retains parental responsibility no matter where that child is placed. But absolutely it is on our radar and something the committee frequently considers.
Okay, Phil? Yep, thanks. Anybody else want to raise anything on this particular item? It's been well discussed. Any final thoughts, anything that you want to bring to our attention as a result of anything as anybody said?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, fine, thank you. So, we've been invited to review and comment on the contents of the report and the presentation, which we've done. There was an agreed further reporting requirement of the board, and I think that's going to be looked at separately. So, we will be looking again at the transformation programme, but it may be in a different form with more responsibility going to individual scrutiny committees. So, do we agree that we've reviewed and commented on the report? And please indicate. It's easy, isn't it, really? Thank you. Yep. Can I thank both of you for the presentation with the support of Debbie? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Okay. If we could now move to item 8 on the agenda. What we're looking at here is the performance of the corporate support services contract, and Colum is here to give us the report. It's on page 43 to 50 for members who...
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm Arndt Hobbourne, the Council's Corporate Support Services Contract Manager, and I'm joined this morning by Graham Beckett, who is Serco's Operational Director for the Lincoln contract. You're looking at the now 6-monthly performance of the Corporate Support Services Contract report, which is, as previously requested, in a exception format. So the report is covering Serco's performance for the periods of months 85 to 90 of the contract, which commenced on the 1st of April 2015. Table 1, you'll see a summary of the KPIs, key performance indicators that apply to the contract, and they are set out as either having been met, the target service level having been, the minimum target service having been met, or below target service level, and also where there has been mitigation agreed. As you can see, during the past 6 months, none of the targets missed their target service level or minimum service level. There were a number of mitigations, as they usually are. There are 39 KPIs in the contract, and this fell briefly to 37 for the months of April to August 22. If you look at table 2, this sets out the details of the mitigations that were applied in the case of the period in question, and the first one is CSE KPI 04. This is the Customer Service Centre KPI that looks at how many calls are abandoned calls to the Customer Service Centre. This one has been in mitigation since May, and the reason for that is that we have there were a number of reasons for it. In the first instance, the CSC, we directed as a council, directed the CSC to divert resources to support the user acceptance testing for the Avaya upgrade project. Once the project was live, although Avaya is up and running, there are a number of issues remaining that directly affect the CSC, which prevents them from meeting their targets. CSE KPI 05 was in mitigation in June and September. This one specifically refers to the percentage of text messages and email messages in a month responded to within a certain period of time. And again, the email issue, point 2 under CSE KPI 04, is the reason for the mitigation granted, as they're unable to operate the email system effectively. For CSE KPI 11, which has also been in mitigation from April to September, this is as a result of a change the council brought about in the carer support service, and we asked the CSE to work in a different way to conduct carer assessments. And this different way improved the service, but meant that the CSE was unable to meet the measures that are required to meet this target. So we agreed suspension of that target for the time being. For CSE, on the next page, CSE KPI 12. A minor apology here. This is referred to as a new KPI, and it's not a new KPI as such. It's a KPI that came into service on the 1st of November 2020, replacing KPI 01, but new in the sense that it has gone live in August following a number of changes. This was brought about as a result of, again, the Avaya upgrade delay. So this was expected at a certain date and it didn't happen. So what happened after that was we didn't want to stand still, so the council and Serco worked together to develop a revised version of this measure so that it could be brought into service, and has been in service now since August. And then we look at then we have IMT. So IMT KPI 12. This measure was, again, with the agreement of the council at our direction. We wanted the staff of the IMT service to direct their resources to the Office 365 ticket resolution. As a result of that coming in, a great number of tickets came in, so we wanted them to direct their effort to that and suspended this KPI for 1 month, April. For IMT KPI 18 and 19, again, just for the 1 month in August, again, service desk staff were required to assist this time with the Avaya-related migrations. And again, the diversion of resource meant they couldn't fulfill the BAU tickets to the level that they would normally expect to. And there were also a shortage of O365 licenses, which has consumed additional resource to bring, again, preventing the fulfillment of KPI 18 and 19. It says on the right-hand side that we were expecting these two to return to green performance in September, and that was the case at the time of writing. I can confirm that they did indeed return to green in September. And finally, PM, this is People Management KPI number 11, was missed as a result of 4 payments not being made on time. However, this didn't have any significant effect, and again, performance was restored the following month. Table 2B is an addendum for CSE KPI 04. I was asked to provide a little bit of additional information to set out where the target for CSE KPI 4, this is the abandoned call rate, which our target service level for that in Lincolnshire is 7% abandoned calls. We conducted some benchmarking activity last year where we asked a number of councils what their target service levels were, and this chart shows the result of that, and as you can see, Lincolnshire sits towards the bottom of the target level. In other words, we are more challenging than the majority of the councils that responded. In Table 3, we set out any changes that have occurred to KPIs during the period of reporting. And there were 2 changes: the removal of adult care finance KPI 3 and KPI 4, and these were replaced by adult care finance KPI 11 and 12. They're very similar targets and very similar KPIs, but refined to be more measurable and more in line with those that are used by other authorities. In section 6, we set out the green trend analysis. This was a piece of work we were asked to look at for each report, where we're tracking the performance of those KPIs that are green. with a view to identifying whether or not the trajectories of those green performances are heading in the wrong direction, whether they're likely to fail at some point. And the analysis for this period up till the end of August is that 76% of the KPIs are currently stable or improving, and none of them are on a trajectory to fail before the end of the contract. In section 7, table 5, we set out the total amount. This is just a graph graphically showing the number of abatement points that are applied to the contract. These are the points that attract potential reparation as a result of failing to perform in the KPIs. And as you can see, again, very few in recent times. So this particular period has been successful. There have been some challenges, most notably that very difficult to recruit candidates to vacancies at present due to difficult market circumstances. But nevertheless, Serco have continued to maintain their staffing levels at standard levels that we would expect. And we have, as reported here, shown a strong green performance with no TSL or MSL failures. So if I may hand over to Graham for some further commentary from Serco.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you again for inviting me along to give you an update. Whilst Arns goes through the sort of formal situation with regards to the contract, I could probably add a bit of flavour as to what's happening within the different service areas, so you've got a bit more of an understanding. From an IMT perspective, performance is pretty strong from a KPI perspective. Service desk tickets are well under control. It is quite a fairly quiet period over the summer for obvious reasons, people on holiday and stuff. So it is sort of a quieter time of the year. As Arnd referred to, we did do a pretty significant upgrade during the summer, June time, to the council's telephony system, which is called Avaya. That upgrade was necessitated by the version of the software that was currently being run was effectively running out of support, so it needed us to move over pretty quickly, which we did. It was a well-managed process. There are a number of issues that Arnd made reference to that are teething problems that we're currently working with the council's supplier, Vodafone, to resolve, and we've got a positive outlook for those to be resolved in the next few months. One other big change within IT is that we do now have a new head of IT, following Ben Johnson left the business at the end of September. We've managed to bring in a lady called Surya Norris, who will take over responsibilities for LCC's IMT. She previously worked on our Hertfordshire contract for a lot of more years than she'd want me to tell you. So she's got quite a big, significant amount of experience to bring to the table, and will provide some sort of consistency along the level of the service. With regards to the CSC, Arnd made reference to the workloads within the carers area. Pleased to report that those got cleared off in readiness for the new service being implemented from the 1st of October, which is a slightly different service model. That has been implemented successfully from our side. KPI performance is strong in those areas that we don't have any external influence. We are continuing, and we did support the migration of Avaya through the team, supporting the user acceptance testing, and helping to resolve some of the problems with the suppliers. Obviously still very much engaged in the council's digital delivery programme, which is key for yourselves to transform the offerings to the customers, and also more recently the replacement of Avaya with a new telephony system called Anywhere 365. So we're heavily involved in those projects, and hopefully see a successful conclusion to them at some point in the next 12 months or so. Again, just a slight change from a personnel perspective. We've also now got a new head of customer services. Sherelle Wilson has taken over from Sarah Johnson. Sarah's moved up within the business to a more strategic role across the different contracts that we run. She is very much still involved in Lincoln, so we have her support as well. And Sherelle's taken to the role quite well and is doing a lot of good things for us. From a transactional services perspective, there's a big project running on at the minute called Sergeant Remedy, which is to do with people's pensions. It's a result of a legal ruling that came about a number of years ago where people, there was a ruling about a decision about ageism, which we have to tackle from a perspective in relation to people transferring from one pension to another. So working closely with the council and the pension fund in relation to that. Strong KPI performance again, obviously contributing to the Business World project, which is a key project for the council. And we've also started having an eye on April 24. So as of later on this morning, I'm in a meeting with Hoople, who are coming in to meet the staff that will transfer over to them from April. So we're trying to get the relationship in a really good place so that we can make the transfer over to them as good as possible. We're also engaged with the council on the services that will transfer back to the council. So that's around the exchequer services and adult social care. We're obviously engaged in the re-tender exercise for the CSC. We're keen to continue to provide the service on behalf of the council, and obviously the tender exercise will be over the next 6 months or so. Arne's made reference to the recruitment challenges. It has been challenging, but actually we're in a pretty good place at the minute. We've been able to leverage some links that we have with the government's Restart programme. We actually provide one of those contracts for the council, actually 2 contracts, one in West Midlands and one in Wales. But what that enables us to do is to have links with the local area. So we've developed links with the suppliers of Restart within Lincolnshire, and that this week has borne fruit in that we've appointed our first person from the Restart programme. So that was really good, because obviously those people have been unemployed for quite a period of time. That's why they're into that scheme. So it's good to see that bear fruit. Obviously a lot of change in the next 12-18 months, a lot of discussions with yourselves and Hoople around the transfer, but during that our commitment obviously remains on keeping the lights on and remaining vigilant on business as usual. One other thing that I'd actually like to mention, which doesn't actually get a lot of notice, which is probably my fault. There's quite a lot of social value activity goes on within the contract in Lincoln. I have a couple of people who are dedicated social value officers that are looking for opportunities where we can help out. That might range from volunteering at community organisations, or more recently we've been doing interviewing workshops for colleges with students that are looking to either move to university or move to employment. And also we've got access to the Serco Foundation, which is a sort of a foundation which is there to fund charities and stuff like that. So our guys have got pretty adept at putting submissions in to this. So more recently, we've just secured a bid to provide some financial support to St Barnabas, and we've also we're in the process of securing some money for an organisation which is called Little Miracles. The other things that we're involved with, I'm personally involved in something called Local Motion, which is a community-related project which is looking to help how we can change things within communities around, in particular around poverty and chances and things like that. So there's quite a lot of activity in that area that we're quite pleased about. It's our way of sort of making a difference within the local community, and probably deserves a bit more recognition than it has to date. That's an update from me. If anybody's got any questions, more than happy to answer them.
Thanks to both of you. Just on your last point, it would be good if you could circulate some information so that every councillor, not just us on OSMB, gets to know about what you out of the social value activity that you were talking about, the positive side of business, as it were.
Yeah, we can do that. We do a regular newsletter across the organisation, so we can copy that people into that. No problem whatsoever.
That's lovely. Okay, anybody want to ask any questions? Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Graham's preempted one of my questions, so he's already answered that. So I've only got one question, which is in relation to CSC KPI 4, percentage of total calls that are abandoned calls. Do you have a breakdown of abandoned calls by service area? If you do, are the abandoned call rates roughly the same across all service areas, or is there any area where the abandoned call rate is much higher? And if so, are there any particular reasons why?
A four-part question. I'll leave you to sort out the individual
Thank
bits.
you, that's a very good question. Yes, indeed. CSA KPI 4 is a single percentage result, but it is, of course, a composite figure for a number of service areas. The abandoned rates will vary between the service areas in any given month, and the reasons for this may be seasonal, they may be caused by specific events or affected by issues such as those that I set out in the presentation regarding pressures on the service. We can, of course, provide a breakdown to illustrate this. Is quite a lot of information. May I propose that we circulate a briefing note to the board after this meeting?
Good idea. Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, could I ask a couple of questions? The first one is to both of you, but Graham made the point that it's been quiet over summer. Okay, I just noted that. So we've got here a detail of KPI mitigations. Okay, not exactly a long list, but there's some reasons why performance couldn't be as it was and was accepted that mitigation should take place. As we move into winter, how do we see, for example, the percentage of abandoned calls being what you might call happening? And there's a second, just like the previous question, two-part question. Callers have to wait rather than opt out for a callback. I just wondered have we got any method of calculating in any way those percentage of people who just don't call back at all?
Yeah. So the second question, the callbacks are where we call people back. Yeah. I can do some digging and get some information over to you about volumes and things like that. There is a challenge at the minute created by the Avaya upgrade, which means that we have a limit on the number of callbacks that can be done at any one point in time, and that is an error on the system because it limits us to 10, whereas we feel that we should be able to do more. So that's an investigation that we're currently on to resolve that technical issue with Vodafone. But I'll get you some information on the callback volumes. Just remind me of the first question again, sorry.
To do with the relationship between this is what happened up to September.
Yeah.
Now we're moving into winter. Having said that it's been quiet over summer, we could expect increased volumes because people are, as you said, not on holiday anymore. I just wonder how we are tackling the issue and whether or not we can expect less abandoned calls.
So the question around the statement I made around it being quiet was probably around the IT area, not necessarily around the services. It does drop off slightly within the summer months, but we are in a very good place to deal with activity that's arising in sort of this time of the year and onwards. As Arndt said, we're at a staffing level which is as high as we have been for a significant period of time. And we've got accurate resourcing models in place that enable us to meet the challenges of any increased demand. The things that are not necessarily in our control around the system, we're working closely with Vodafone to resolve. But as of this morning, the impact of the sort of issues that we have with the system is reducing. So month to date is around about 8% at the minute, which is significantly better than it was previously.
That's good. Turning to Arnd, we've got details of benchmarking with other local authorities that dates back to January 2021, which is over 18 months ago. I don't know how easy it is, but it would be good, I can't help but feel, if we know what the current situation is. So could you tell us whether you can get that information pretty easily?
Yes, the benchmarking exercise was simply an officer contacting those authorities and asking for the information. Of course, we could repeat that task and that can be done. I would possibly venture to suggest that the abandoned rates that authorities use change rarely. For instance, if someone rang us up, we would say 7%, and it's been that for the last 7 years. So it is unlikely that we would find a particularly changed position with regard to that. However, of course, we could do that. It just consumes a bit of resource, which we wouldn't normally have prioritised to the task. Happy to do so, of course.
Yeah, just for confirmation, just to see. I mean, it is a good figure. There's no doubt about it. And you mentioned 8% as well, which would also be good. So it's just a reassurance, and I'm not saying it's going to happen regularly, but 18 months seems a reasonable time. Okay.
Chairman, your microphone.
My fault. So I'm just going back to the agenda item 8, actions required. The board is invited to seek assurance about the performance of the corporate support services contract and provide feedback and challenge as required. Well, we've done both of those things, so are we happy to receive the report as printed? Those in favour say yep. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Nope. Can I thank both of you for your presentations? And yep, very helpful indeed. If we move to item 9 on the agenda, okay, that's the Health and Safety Annual Report 2021-2. And we've got Fraser here. Yep, Fraser Shooter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, this is the annual report covering 21-22, and it's designed to give some key actions and significant actions that we've taken during that year to gain assurance that the Council continues to maintain its statutory duties in relation to health and safety law. One of the key indicators in relation to that is obviously whether we've had any informal investigations or enforcement action by the HSE, and I'm happy to report that we had no formal investigations or no interventions from the HSE that year, and that's even with an increased interest from the HSE. Obviously, they were involved quite significantly in doing COVID safety checks of a lot of our buildings, so we had a vast increase of interest from the HSE, and even with that, we had no interventions at all from the HSE. That's very positive in relation to sort of proving that we are meeting our statutory duties. Following on from that, we had over 9,000 health and safety e-learning courses completed by our staff. That's a return back to sort of pre-COVID figures. That is the highest number we've ever hit in relation to e-learning training. It does show a significant shift with our staff moving away from more traditional classroom training and moving more towards a digital way in which they are interacting with their health and safety learning as they move forward. So we continue to push that as one of our main sources of providing health and safety training, especially in a smarter working environment. Linked to that, in the way in which staff access general health and safety guidance and information, we've developed a one-stop shop, which is pulling together all the health and safety information, which was quite fragmented in the old system, into one single location on the new health and safety hub. And that's proved a lot easier for staff to access information and guidance. We're still in the middle of that. We're transferring a lot of information, updating that into that hub, but that continues to be a positive step forward. Once again, we continue to focus a lot of our attention on our maintained schools. Part of that is doing the health and safety self-assessment, and for the 4th consecutive year we've at 100% return rate with that. That essentially picks out key health and safety questions that we ask schools in relation to, again, their compliance with statutory duties. It's like a mini audit. We get information back, we analyse that information, that data, and then from that we decide what support some of our schools may need additionally from that. And that might involve just over the phone or telephone conversations all the way through to doing an actual site inspection and everything in between. But that is the fundamental basis of identifying where that support is needed. Again, we move forward with our incident reporting system. Happy to report from previous years we were struggling to get a new system in place. We've now got that in place now. That was introduced in April 21. That's the Evo Safe system. That vastly improves the way in which staff can report incidents, accidents and near misses. For the first time ever, we're able to really accurately record near misses and dangerous occurrences, not just incidents that result in accidents. So that will help us to develop trends and patterns and data as we start to get years worth of information, which again will help us to identify where the resources of my team need to be spent really going forward. One of the key benefits of this new system is also allowing us to identify the number of days lost as a result of accidents at work. We've never been able to really capture that information in any significant detail. So going forward, that really will help us to, again, identify those service areas that are having more serious type accidents, and again, identify where we need to provide that additional support going forward. One of the key things that we're most likely to see going forward is an increase in the number of incidents that we actually get reported. But we're hoping to see a significant drop in the severity of those incidents. We've done a lot of promotion with our staff in relation to the system, what it can record, what we're expecting to be recorded, and we're expecting staff to record more things on the system, which will, as I say, slightly show an increase in the numbers. But over years, we're expecting, with the ability to be able to identify the number of days lost as a result of the severity of it, to hopefully report back to you that, yes, we're having more incidents, but they're having a lesser impact on our ability to provide a resource and our duty to maintain health and safety statutory requirements. One of the other key issues in relation to the Evo Safe systems as well, you'll see that children's, when you look at the figures, looks quite drastic. It's quite an increase compared to other services. There's more than one justification for that. One, they are our biggest service. They employ the biggest amount of people. So straight away, they are going to have a number of incidents more than anybody else. But as an addition to that, that includes all our LCC maintained schools and all the pupils who attend that as well. So there's lots of playground incidents and accidents, very, very low risk, knocks and bangs, scrapes, those kind of things that are being reported on the system. That's good from our perspective. We want to get that information. Again, it helps us to identify trends and patterns, and potentially it links into our children's school self-assessment. It identifies certain questions that we want to ask in forthcoming assessments where there seems to be a trend or pattern that we want to dig a bit deeper in. So we encourage that. But again, it looks at first glance, those statistics are quite drastic, but they are justifiable as to why they are slightly higher. Moving on, as we moved into a smarter working environment, there was a need to continue and give that level of assurance that the council was maintaining its statutory duties when it comes to DSE regulations and workstations. We worked with our existing system, which was an online system, the Shine system, which we'd had previously. And we developed an online assessment, workstation assessment, that took into the differences between having what was traditionally a fixed desk in a fixed office to now a more transient workplace where staff could book at any desk at any time in multiple buildings, and how the old regulations, which are essentially 30 years old, how do we give assurance that we are meeting the standards of regulations that don't really mirror the way in which we now work, the technology that we use. So we've created that. That's been out around about a year. A significant amount of staff are using that now. Again, it's identifying to staff that this is the correct way to set up a workstation. This is the equipment that you need. There is more than ever a responsibility placed on the employees to read that information and then implement that information. It's difficult for us, or nearly impossible for us, to visit every single person's home. There is a grey area in relation to the regulations as to how far do we step as an authority across that line into ensuring somebody's home is safe. So we provide a significant amount of information, and guidance has been produced in relation to how to set up desks, how to set up workstations, what equipment is needed, and that's been heavily promoted over this last year to really increase the knowledge and the awareness of staff of how to set up a desk safely within their working environment, their home working environment. And this is the long game. Issues, injuries, illness as a result of incorrect or poor posture does not show its face 6 months or a year down the line. This is 5, 10 years down the line. And we need, as an authority, to be in a position to be able to potentially defend ourselves in future claims to say we did everything that we felt reasonable at the time, we provided information, we educated our staff. There was an element of self-responsibility placed on the staff to implement, understand that information. So we continue doing that. We continue to push that on a regular basis through INCOMs and through directorate reports and things like that. Moving forward in relation to the digital programme again, we introduced and developed an online auditing system. Obviously, COVID prevented us from going out and doing our regular on-site inspections, so we needed a way in which we could still continue to gain some level of assurance that health and safety standards were being implemented across the council. We developed that with managers. They interacted with us, we cooperated with them, we developed an online audit. It still asks the same key questions to gather assurance that the key basic health and safety requirements are being met. It requires managers to provide evidence to back up their answers, so it's not just a they said, she said, it's actually the providing information, the documentation can be uploaded on the system for us to analyse that and give an assurance that yes, we are satisfied that it meets the standards. We've trialled that. It was very successful with the trial. We had feedback. We've improved the system. We continue to develop the system as we move forward on the feedback we get as we do more and more assessments. But it's really allowed us to maximise our resources. And at the end of last year, not only had we completed our 21-22 audit rota, we'd actually completed the backlog from the restriction that we had in COVID in 2021. So we're back up to where we should be now. And that now is a fundamental way in which we do audits going forward. We use that similar to the self-assessment. We get the information from the audit, we analyse that, and we make a decision as to whether further support is needed. So we still do on-site audits, we still do further investigations, but that's based on the information we get back from the actual online audit. And that's really the main element, so I'm happy to take any questions on that or any queries. Thank you very much.
Just before I bring you in, Councillor Strangle, the two people who are pictured, Andrew and Councillor Whittington, I don't know if either of you want to add anything. I'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, so yeah, we obviously take the health and safety responsibilities of the council very, very seriously, and I'm pleased to say that the development that Fraser in particular has driven forward this annual reporting mechanism over the last 3 years in particular has been really, really pleasing to see. I think for members' benefit in particular, and maybe Mark will add to this. Mark is our representative, a member representative on our internal corporate risk and health and safety group, which I chair. And I think the most pleasing aspect is the engagement that we get from all parts of the council in terms of feeding into this agenda. Really, really, as I say, all areas take it very, very seriously. And, you know, we do use that group to great effect, and the outcomes of that group are, you know, evident in partly in the report that Fraser brought to you today. So that's the main thing I'd like to say. You know, very high profile subject matter for officers of the council, and we're very ably supported by Mark's or Councillor Whittington's involvement in that group as well. So thank you.
That's good to hear. Mark, would you like to put your observations, thoughts about the report?
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I mean, I think the report, as Andrew's just mentioned, you know, over the years, last few years, Fraser's done a really good job in developing this. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah. Sorry. Do you want to carry on?
Sorry, my screen went a bit funny. So, Yes, and the corporate risk steering group meets 3 or 4 times a year. It's a really good forum. It helps to sort of standardise health and safety across the council, so I'm happy to play a part in that, and also sort of just to get a message across to members, so that obviously health and safety is very, very important. But obviously it involves the councillors as well. One thing particular we have discussed previously is around the sort of safety of councillors, especially when they're out and about doing work with their constituents. Because obviously we're in the sort of context where we've had, obviously, sadly, 2 MPs in the last few years have been killed. Other reports of councillors being subjected to, abuse and stuff. So it's really to sort of just get a message out to councillors that they're very much part of our discussions as well. That's all I've really got to say. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Eddie, Councillor Strangle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Fraser, for your report. It mentions earlier in your report that the HSE have no issues or concerns about how we're running, but I bring your attention to page 68, and it's maybe human nature to always look at things that may move into the red, and on page 68 on the slide, it actually mentions enforcement action from the HSE against LCC, amber red. Could you explain how serious that is, if indeed it is serious? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's primarily in relation to health and safety training for managers and awareness of their responsibilities and duties. It was an issue that had been identified through our audit processes over the previous years leading up to the COVID element. During COVID, one of the things we did is we had to review the way in which we did training because we were unable to provide training in a classroom setting. That was primarily how we provided training to our managers, so there was an issue there. That's now been resolved. We've now created a course that can be delivered either in a classroom or remote setting, so we're able to provide that if restrictions come in again. We've also reduced the time restraints because it was a 4-day course in a classroom. That obviously is resource heavy for managers, and sometimes that became an issue. So now we've worked to create like an open university style training. It's reduced the amount of time that managers need to basically allocate. 4 days, it's now over. It's 2 days, but that's spread over 6 weeks. And we've created several e-learning courses and modules that over a 6-week period, managers are expected to complete, self-learn. Then we have them in and we do a half-day classroom session where we do a practical session which goes over our systems and our processes, the logistics of making safety work on a day-to-day basis. And then at the end we have an examination. It's an open book examination, but it is an examination to quantify their knowledge, to make sure they understand what we want them to understand, and they then have access to that information that they've gone through as part of their training from that point going forward, because we don't expect them to remember everything all the time. We're hoping that some of the elements of health and safety they never have to worry about because it never happens, but we have to inform them about it, and then they have access to that to refer back to if they need to in the future. That's been a course that's been started this year, this financial year, and we're starting to roll that out now. So hopefully by the end of this year, we should be able to drastically reduce that risk factor because we'll have more and more managers back up to a level of training that we feel comfortable is suitable and sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Yep. Councillor Brooks, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Just got a couple of questions. Our self-assessment is referred to health and safety self-assessments and the 100% return rate. And I think Fraser might have alluded to it towards the end, and it's good to talk. Do we do any site inspections? Do we do to check the audits returns that we get back, presumably on a random basis or something like that? And the other question I had, near misses and dangerous occurrences, reporting of those. My experience in other organisations is often very difficult to get people to report near misses or dangerous occurrences because they feel as though they might be sort of pointing the finger at themselves, I'm just wondering how we get around that, and thank you.
No problem, right. Take the first one in relation to self-assessment. Yes, we do. We have a health and safety work plan with children's. We agree with senior managers of children's, the number of audits that they want to take place. What schools are audited, sometimes are random, sometimes are based on the responses we get from the self-assessment, sometimes are based on evidence or information that we've got. For example, if we get a particular school that has a significant increase in a particular type of accident or has a significant accident, that might be enough for us to justify them to be placed on that work plan. We then take a random selection of the good, the bad and the ugly, if you like. The ones who scored 100% on the return rate, sometimes we're a little bit suspicious of them, so we take a dip sample of them to confirm that yes, that is correct. We take some in the middle, and then ultimately we do tend to focus our resources on more on the schools that have scored poorly. Although over the last 12 years in which we've had this assessment, the ranges of what used to be good, bad or different, no school, even the worst scoring school, is normally in the 80% now. So we really have pushed the quality up across the board. But, you know, ultimately a school that would have been good 10 years ago, unfortunately, if the score they're saying now would be classed as a bad scoring school. But we have, you know, it's a positive thing that we've done that. But yes, so we do on-site audits. Yes, it's different in the way in which we approach them, but we do that. In relation to the second question, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a cultural thing. With this being a new process that we've brought in, that's one of the reasons we've done heavy communication, heavy promotion. We include it in every single Directorate Health and Safety report to try and get that message across. We want engagement back from services because the system allows and can be developed to increase the number of types of near misses that staff have, because it works on a drop-down box system. So we want to try and encourage managers to feed back to us to say, these are the types of near misses we have on a regular basis. Are you able to input that into the system to make it easier for staff to identify it and select it? So it's going to be a continuous thing over the next couple of years that we continue to promote the system, inform staff that it isn't just for when you've had an injury, it can capture these types of things as well. Some services are better than others engaging. It depends on what they see as a risk. Some of our areas like highways and things like that work in a high-risk environment. They're better at reporting that kind of near-miss incident because they know they may not get a second bite next time, so they want to do that. Some of our lower-risk services, the message is a little bit more difficult to report that near-miss. So that's a continuous thing we'll be doing over the next years as we continue to promote the new Evo Safe system. Thank you.
Is that okay? Yes. Yep, sound. Councillor Dilks, Phil.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Fraser, for the excellent report. I really welcome it. A couple of questions I just wanted to ask, and I really welcome particularly the progress that's been made on staff well-being, and particularly post-pandemic. We're all told, you know, that the next pandemic is actually a mental health challenge, if I could put it that way. So I wanted to ask, is there any evidence of despite what we're doing, an increase of staff going off with mental health problems post-pandemic, and how are we sort of monitoring and looking at that? And then if I could move on, and I look at the appendix to it's page 66 on the Evo Safe report forms, and I note that you did mention that the you know, that most of the incidents were in reported incidents were in schools. I see that, of course, from the pie chart. When you look at the you know, the incidents in schools, and these are only our own schools, I understand you sort of saying, but when you look at the incidents in our own schools plus other children's services incidents, it's over 3/4 of all incidents were related to children, if I could put it that way, or children's services in any case. And I just kind of wonder, it worries me that what goes on in non-county council schools, if I can call them that now, you know, what goes on in the academies in terms of health and safety. Okay, well, I suppose we can say, well, it's not our problem anymore, but maybe it is. I'd suggest it is. So that's sort of one question. And then sort of linked to that is, the incidents that are happening in our own schools, you know, I appreciate what you're saying is they are mostly minor, you know, cuts and grazes, etc. But is there any sort of lesson that we can take from that, or what lessons do we take from it in promoting health and safety to our schools and to children themselves, perhaps? So that's that point. And then I think the final thing was that I wanted to ask was really about the costs. I think somebody mentioned costs and compensation. There's nothing sort of in the report about that, and I wonder, you know, if we could get some, you know, presumably some of these accidents will have cost the county in claims of one sort or another, and I would welcome any statistics on that and how well we're doing on that. But particularly, I note there's no reference to highways in the reported incidents and accidents, and I wonder about, for example, potholes and pothole damage, and you know, where do I find that information on the number of incidents reported to the council, and how much compensation is it now costing the council? Because I do see in the chart, the pie chart on page 66 below the reports forms, is that over 60% of the reports seem to be from non-employees. And I wonder if you'd say a bit more about that, Fraser. Thank you.
I just make the point that I'm not sure if Fraser's able to answer the question about the potholes issue, because if there's no injury, then it wouldn't be a health and safety matter. But it's there for people like Andrew. But do you want to deal? Yeah, I'll bring you in, Andrew, in a moment. But I just wondered if you could go through the 3 or 4 questions, Fraser, that was asked.
I'll go through the ones I can give a reply on, and then I'll pass over to Andrew for the ones I can't. So in relation to the potholes and things like that, I think Andrew will go in more details, but that falls under insurance. So that's a different department. We look at purely health and safety in relation to our employees and the services we directly provide to our employees, so schools, social services, things like that. So that's the statistics there within that report. So they don't cover things like public accidents and damage to cars through potholes and things like that. That's not part of that system. So in relation to your first question, which I believe was around well-being and welfare, things like that, we do have some involvement with health and safety, obviously. There's a link there. That's primarily led by HR. I don't have the statistics because they are managed and overseen by our HR department. In relation to the feedback we're getting from a health and safety perspective, I think there's 2 sides in which the council approach this now. There's the proactive element in relation to we provide systems and processes for staff to access. That's an element, again, of responsibility on staff to access these services to hopefully prevent them from getting to a stage where it may result in them having to take time off. We've got counselling services. We've got a fantastic website that's now available. We've got mental health first aiders that's accessible for staff to access. So I think that is definitely a vast improvement. As I say, I don't know what knock-on effect that's actually had on statistics in relation to staff and stress and depression, things like that. The flip side to that is the reactive, which I think is obviously where potentially staff have had time off as a result of stress, and the support mechanisms we now have within the council to support staff to get well, to get back to work, whether that's through our occupational health contract, again through the counselling services. And I think more than ever before, it's on the forefront of managers' minds now in relation to that being an element of getting staff back to work is one of the key questions. So I think, yes, that is definitely improvement. As for statistics, I'm more than happy to speak to HR and get some figures for you in relation to that. Just remind me what your second question was in relation to schools, I believe. Yeah.
Sorry, it was about particularly about, you know, these are our own schools. You know, what happens in the academies and non-county schools, if I can call them that. Yeah.
So obviously, as again, this system can be only accessed by our maintained schools, so they're the ones we have the statutory duty for. They're the ones we need the information on. In relation to non-LCC schools, we do provide a health and safety service if requested by these schools through our EduLink system. So we do provide auditing, we do provide inspections. Some schools do interact with the self-assessment. It is a paid-for service. We can't enforce them to do it, but there are a number of non-LCC schools that, I suppose, acknowledge the importance of health and safety. And that's not to say that schools that are non-LCC don't. They probably get in their support from other providers. But there are a number who, I suppose, acknowledge the fact that as LCC, we are best placed to know the schools within our county. So yes, we are providing that. In relation to some of the questions that we have in the self-assessment and the accidents we have, we analyse those accidents. Yes, they are a high number, as you do say. We use that information to really pinpoint and focus what questions we ask in our self-assessment going forward. So we do analyse that information. Yes, there may be a lot of low-level incidents, but if that's identifying a trend or a pattern that we feel we need to look into a little bit more detail, then we will create a set of questions for that self-assessment that digs deeper into that particular area. For example, bumps and scrapes on the playground, it seems fairly insignificant, but if that's due to poor maintenance of that playground, then we want to know about it. So we'll set a series of questions around maintenance of play areas and things like that. So we do use that information, and that does drive the self-assessment going forward. Andrew, if you want to take over.
Thank you. Andrew, you wanted to come in, and then maybe Debbie, did you? Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Parker. So I was going to cover a bit about the HR question. Clearly, we bring the HRMI report on a fairly regular basis here, and that is information that is generally contained in there. I think a couple of things that I can say is that, you know, in terms of the main reasons why we do have staff absence, things like mental health and stress-related issues do form a chunk of the days that we do lose as an organisation, albeit our most recent performance session we had with the corporate leadership team, that is showing a positive trend of reducing and is at the lowest level it has been for 4 years now. At the same time, over the last month, we've extended our commitment to the health and wellbeing initiatives that Fraser referred to in his response. And it's something as a corporate leadership team we take very, very seriously. So whether that's providing resilience for our leaders and in the way that they manage and how they can manage their individual teams with issues like this, or more general support in terms of how colleagues can respond to mental health challenges. It's something we do take really seriously and are continuing to develop all the time. And you know, the statistics would suggest that is having a positive impact in what I said in terms of that reducing trend. So that's that. And I guess I'll just, whilst I've got the mic as well, before Debbie comes in, on the insurance front, I haven't got the numbers, but we can provide some statistics on claims and the value of claims. You know, as one would expect, with the size of the county that we've got and the length of the highways network which we're responsible for, it is an involved process and one that we are continually refining as well. But I'll seek to provide some figures to the committee after the meeting, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just really to add to the point around the academies that aren't part of our maintained schools. As Fraser has said, we offer a traded service to them. Some choose that, some don't choose that. So we don't have the same degree of oversight unless they choose to come to us. The only thing that I would say is that in terms of our relationship with our schools, we do have a really strong relationship. So we've got 4 locality leads who are our sort of contact point with all of our schools. Lincolnshire children go to Lincolnshire schools, so the structure doesn't really matter. We are interested in their outcomes. And I think it would be fair to say that the nature of the relationship is that if there was something significant from a health and safety perspective, either to a member of staff or to a pupil, the schools, the academies would tend to ring us up for advice and support anyway. So we would tend to have oversight of it just because of the nature of the relationship between the local authority. Obviously, parents tend to turn to the local authority if they're struggling with something around the school. And so even either if it's through the parent or through the school themselves, it would be highly unusual for us not to be aware of something significant.
Anyone else? Yep. Over to you, Nigel.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to congratulate and thank whoever set the report out in the way that it is. Be that Andrew, be that Fraser, or indeed someone else. You know, the little pictures, the little infographics, your eye is drawn to them, and you almost know what's going to say before you read it. And you know, if you have to flick back, you can easily find it. So yes, well done whoever came up with that.
I think we'd all agree with that. Anyone else? I want to ask a question, really, and I suppose it comes back to the last two years or so. Transformation, we've had a major transformation in the way that we operate, simply as a result of COVID. We've thought about people working from home, and that's the issue that I just want to raise, because in a sense I can't help but feel that when people go to work, then the responsibility significantly is on the employer to provide a safe working environment. When people at home, they don't see themselves as being at work in the physical sense of the building, they're at home. And that may create a different mindset in the sense of safety. Most people try to be safe anyway, but I just wonder to what extent are we getting, if at all, reports of accidents at home? Because as more and more of our workforce come into working from home, I just wonder about the correlation between those that are working from home substantially and those that work primarily in county offices or in another location where there's much difference.
In relation to the stats, we're seeing no significant numbers in relation to staff reporting accidents at home. And I think, as you say, I think it is very much a mindset of people. They are in their home. They don't necessarily report the accident that they've had, the trip over the threshold or something like that, in the same way they would if they tripped over a threshold in an office environment. It is a cultural thing. I think it links to previously talking about near misses and dangerous occurrences, that we've never had this environment that we've worked in before. I think it's something we do need to be mindful of moving forward in the way in which we promote EvoSafe and the information we provide to staff on the expectation of the type of incidents that we would still expect them to report, even though it's happened within their home environment. But at the minute, the statistics aren't showing that. I don't know whether that's because staff are not having accidents, hopefully that is the reason, or whether it's a cultural thing that staff just don't realise or don't want to report incidents happening in their home environment.
This committee, though, if we agree, could actually make the point that we would welcome some work, and I don't mean a huge amount of work at all, but to put some, try to get across the recognition of the importance of people at home being just as safe or aware of safety issues at home as they are at work. Because inevitably somebody is going to have an accident sooner or later at working from home. And we want to at least get people into the mindset that they are not only at home, but they're also in a working environment.
Yeah, I mean, when we had the initial push to work from home when the restrictions came in, we did pull together a guidance document for staff highlighting exactly what you say, key safety things to look for when working at home, setting up a safe working station, electrical safety, that kind of thing. That now has been amended into a smarter working guidance that incorporates both working at home and working in the office environment. And it covers, as you say, those key basics of not only just how to remain safe within the office environment, but also things to be wary of within your own home environment. So the information is out there, it is promoted on a regular basis, but I'm more than happy again to do a campaign again to really push that message home in relation to, you know, your home is also your workstation, and because of that it comes with certain requirements and certain responsibilities. There are tools, there is equipment, there is guidance that we provide. It's just a matter of reminding staff it's out there for them to read that and inwardly digest it and then implement it in their own homes.
Okay. Anything else that anybody wants to raise? Great. As Nigel said, excellent report. Thank you. Well laid out. And we've had the opportunity to ask some questions. Okay, so what we've been asked to do is to seek assurance on the contents of the Health and Safety Annual Report for 2021-22. I think we've done that, so those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Fraser.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we now move on to item 10, Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. We're getting a report on Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee and Highways and Transport. So, Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee report. Yep, fine, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning. There is a report which everybody has received. I'll take that as read. Since that agenda, the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee met on the 25th of October under slightly unusual circumstances due to the death of the Queen. And I'll use this opportunity to update the board primarily on those items considered. At that meeting, we received a briefing on the decision made in September in relation to the Household Waste Recycling Centre's reception facilities dynamic purchasing system. I'm very proud that I can pronounce that. To clarify, that decision was made in the absence of pre-decision scrutiny. That meeting was adjourned due to the loss of the Queen. It is worth highlighting that officers and the executive member were working against a very, very tight timetable on that issue, which had to be in place from October 2022. Members at our meeting on Tuesday were satisfied that this was a good system that encouraged the use of commercial input, particularly from small and medium-sized enterprises in close proximity to household waste recycling centres, and also allowed the continuity of a valued and effective service. The committee also received performance indicators for economy, flooding and waste. I'll just highlight a few of those. In terms of the economy, we did concentrate on changes to funding for our business support activity. Those changes had to some degree delayed provision of support whilst the team was bidding for additional funds to enable the continuity of service. We did receive assurance that the indicator will be met and indeed potentially exceeded before the end of the financial year. We also heard that our officers had attended the Real Estate Investment and Infrastructure Forum, which had the opportunity to promote our county and attract investors and again to seek additional funding. Chairman, we discussed further changes which are likely on levelling up and the Shared Prosperity Fund. These will require reforecasting in readiness for a changing picture. Clearly those items are very much influenced by what is going on at a national level. Turning to flooding, as members of this committee will be aware, we have been working through, or our officers have, a backlog of just under 200 investigations, Section 19 investigations, some of which date back to 2019-2020, with 47 being added from the storms which were experienced in late August this year. We were also informed that as part of the event occurring in August, that emergency planning procedures were being reviewed, and that was being fed back to the November meeting of the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee. From a personal point of view, I did express to officers a concern that Section 19 gave us, as the lead local flooding authority, a responsibility to investigate under the Section 9 procedure, but the same Act did not give us the automatic power to enforce solutions to the problems that we investigate. Officers were in fact quite reassuring, and from their point of view they felt that we were by and large being able to get the right mitigation and remediation into place. Finally, Chairman, turning to waste, we noted in the meeting that the recycling rate had fallen a little below target, and we discussed at some length ways in which we could work to improve that. Overall, it was believed that behaviour seems to have changed, not just in our county but elsewhere. In the course of the pandemic, and as we move out of the pandemic, there is rather less waste being produced per household, which is good news, but the less good news is that the percentage of recycling has fallen away, and in some areas the quality of recycling is challenged. And again, we sought assurance from officers that they would continue to liaise with our districts, who are of course the Waste Collection Authority, to reinforce those messages, and some further data will come back to the committee at future meetings to allow us to continue to investigate that. Chairman, you may think that a rather dry report on coastal car parking charges would not be something which would stimulate much debate and interest. Quite the reverse. And I think it was one of the things that I was most encouraged about by what was an exceedingly good meeting on Tuesday. The interest that we had, both from divisional members on the coast, from divisional members elsewhere, from members of the committee, and indeed from executive members on that subject. We looked at the report, which was about coastal car parking charges and strategy, but we broadened out in the debate. Sorry, I'm hearing a voice from somewhere else. I'm not quite sure where that's coming from, Chairman. Perhaps. Well, we'll try and proceed. My apologies. We looked at forming a work group to pursue a number of items which has come out of that. One was that in our coastal areas, the context of wider appeal for tourism, and looking at the service we provide in terms of car parking, and the provision of appropriate facilities. A particularly strong strand in that was the issue of motorhomes, Chairman. Where we have in the past looked at motorhomes, it has often been in the context of there being a problem, and there can be problems. Members were also keen to stress that that is a very significant opportunity for tourism in the county. And I think that in the work, as the working group goes forward, along with best practice, which we can learn from elsewhere, will be a strong theme. It is important to stress to this committee, as we noted in Environment and Economy, that we do not have an exclusive power over this. It's not an exclusive county responsibility. We share that with, for example, second-tier councils and other entities, and it will be important going forward to find a concise way of making sure that we draw all those strands together. The matter is being looked at by myself and our designated scrutiny officer in terms of scoping what this work might be. It will, if I have anything to do with it, be tight, it will be focused, it will be action-oriented. We did have a Tourism Commission report last year, which came to the committee. We don't want to duplicate that, but I think there were some very, very encouraging strands of thinking that came out across the chamber as part of that debate. And it was really good to see Scrutiny picking something up and actually run with it, not just sitting and receiving reports and voting on them, but actually acting on something and trying to generate some new ideas. We'll have to see how that one develops, but I will obviously keep this committee up to speed on that. Just a few other items, Chairman. The meeting also debated and contributed towards this Council's submission on a non-statutory consultation being undertaken by Anglian Water about a proposed new reservoir in the southern part of the county near Sleaford. Very, very important in terms of water management and treating water, which we sometimes have too much of, as a resource as opposed to just a problem. But the committee was emphatic in the need, if I can quote myself, Chairman, to put front and centre the needs of local communities and those directly affected by this proposal, as well as just focusing on the potential benefits. And finally, Chairman, we looked at the report entitled Energy for Growth. Concern was expressed that the supply of power was potentially a restraint on economic development within the county, and we are engaging through our officers and executive members with the relevant entities there. Lastly, in terms of future work, I would just say that you can find details on pages 75 to 77 of the agenda pack. A couple of items to add to that: development management, design approach, development road specification, which will now be due in April 2023, and adoption of stalled estate roads, also due in May 2023. Finally, Chairman, I just go back to the point I made about the coastal parking issue. I think the way that we do things is almost as important as what we do. And I think we have an excellent and inquiring spirit amongst the committee members, and that gives me a very positive view for the future. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thanks. Really good report. Thank you. Okay, questions? Yep. Councillor Dilks, Phil.
I'm kind of welcome what you particularly say. I declare my interest, I've got to say, as an owner of a rather elderly motorhome, but also as chairman of the scrutiny panel, looking currently at how we can improve town centres across the county. And it does seem, and we've had the discussion within that panel about the opportunities that, you know, motorhomes coming, and particularly post-pandemic, they've become, almost everybody's got them. No, that's wrong, but you know what I mean. They've become much more popular, and it does seem that there's possibly a lost opportunity across Lincolnshire at the moment in seeing them as a bit of a problem. You know, I accept there have been problems, of course, particularly on the coast. But you know, when you go to other places, France comes to mind, you know, that most towns actually have a motorhome overnight stop where people will do that at minimum cost and then go into the town and perhaps spend money in hotels and shopping, etc. You know, so there is a real opportunity there. So I really welcome the fact that you are going to scrutinise that and have a look at it. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Chairman, just through you, I just point out that, as we all know, under equalities legislation, age is a protected characteristic. So having an old motorhome is no bar to enjoying the motorhome. But I'm sure that the work group will tap into such work as been done by the group in which you're involved.
I'd be interested, actually, following on from what Phil said about the work that you're going to do in relation to motorhomes. I say that from picking up the point that Phil raised, which was essentially about towns and the work that that Scrutiny Committee is doing on town centres. I represent Car Home Division, which includes, for example, Lincoln Castle, and we have at the Lawns a big car park which is regularly used by up to 10 motorhomes each weekend. And I'm just interested in the line that's likely to be taken with the relationship between coastal areas on the one hand and town centres on the other. Do we see them as overlapping, or to what extent, or do we see them as separate? Because although the issues may be different, the fact that we're getting motorhomes with attendant people within them is good for tourism. So I'd just be interested in knowing how that town centre on the one hand and motorhomes, and how your work in relation to coastal areas is going to come together.
Chairman, it's a very good question. I don't want to go into too much details about the line that may be taken. That is clearly very much down to the committee and the work group, which evolves, and at the moment we're just scoping that. But I would say that in the course of the meeting, the point was made very strongly by members from all sides of the chamber that we were not just thinking about the coast, we were thinking about, for example, the Lincolnshire Wolds, we were thinking indeed about our towns and larger villages. And I think Councillor Dilks makes an important point. We did, when beginning to think about scoping our terms of reference and what we wanted to do, we did talk about best practice elsewhere, both in this country. One member raised some positive steps being taken in Northumberland, where there are perhaps some geographic similarities to ourselves, but also in other countries. These can be a problem. And if you get a car park which is suddenly overfull of them or or becomes dominated by them, there can be problems. We're aware of that. But I think one of the things I hope the work group will explore is ways that we can work, not just ourselves, but in concert with the private sector, tourism providers, to facilitate provision which will allow this sector to develop and come to Lincolnshire and contribute to our tourism economy and enjoy all the manifest things we have, be it in cities or be it in rural areas, in a way which does not adversely affect host communities. And that's I think, going to be, I suspect, without prejudging my members, I think that will be a theme which will be very thoroughly explored.
I've got a question, excuse me, separate to what picking on what you said in your report. And that was about household waste recycling being down. Okay, so early days, I suspect. I wondered if this is a national trend. And when we consider household waste, Lincolnshire is a big county. And I wondered whether or not we had any knowledge yet of the differences between areas. I mean, the simple one would be the 7 districts. Are they differing? Is there any difference between, let's say, Lincoln on the one hand as a major centre of population, similar to Grantham for example, and more rural areas. So although those are questions that I'm asking, I'd like to think that the committees, your scrutiny committee is looking at them as well. But perhaps you could give us the beginning of where we're at in identifying why we think recycling is down, and how much does it vary between different parts of the county?
Yes, again, good question, Chairman. And the answer to that is we have asked for data which will do just that. I think when we look at the 7 districts, it is worth remembering that they are at different stages in implementing paper and card waste collection. And that obviously has a very major impact in terms of the overall throughput. We're now into, I think, our 3rd district doing that. There are differences. Overall, I think numbers are down, if I'm working from memory here, but I think it was by volume, we're looking at perhaps 2 or 3%, but that's 2 or 3% in the wrong direction, even though overall waste was always down, was also down. What we have asked for is not only an assessment of variations within Lincolnshire, but also some benchmarking against other areas of the country nationally, not just analogues to Lincolnshire rural shire counties, but also looking at some urban areas as well. And the purpose for doing that was really to see if by looking at those numbers, we can analyse any trends which would begin to explain the kind of behavioural shift we seem to have seen between pre-pandemic and emerging from pandemic, hopefully, which would then help us in turn to communicate to our residents to try and drive these numbers back up. So it's a work in progress, Chairman, but we will be getting more information at our future meetings, which will begin to answer the questions you've outlined.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to ask any questions of Ian about Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee? Nope. If we could move on then to the next one, which is the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll take the report as read in the papers here, and therefore focus on the contents of the agenda that was considered this past Monday on the 24th of October, and give the board a quick overview and flavour of the topics discussed. At this meeting, we received a briefing on 2 decisions made in September in relation to the highway service, namely the inflation's options paper and the winter maintenance contract award. Now, these 2 items were pre-decision items on the previous scrutiny committee agenda for the 12th of September, which sadly had to be adjourned because of the passing of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. So, and those decisions were due to be taken quite urgently, really, because of what they were: inflation's options paper, helping out the small and medium enterprises in the highways contract chain to uplift their rates to enable any danger to the highways contract delivery to be avoided, and also the winter maintenance contract award for the gritter fleet. We're coming into the gritter. The winter gritting season starts at the beginning of October, so that was a decision that needed to be made quickly. So that decision was made and came to us as a briefing post decision being made, and both those decisions were subject to call in, and so and weren't called in. So I take it that the members as a whole across the council were content with that. The committee debated the Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Strategy and Plan and unanimously agreed to support the recommendation of these to the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT for his decision between the 31st of October and the 9th of November. Some of the key points passed on to the Executive Member for consideration included association of costs incurred in maintaining unclassified roads with the nature of Lincolnshire's geography, concerns around the condition of unclassified roads across county and the impact on costs for maintenance on local residents and travellers' vehicles, as well as an increase in the risk to life emerging from poor condition. And we sought for additional assurances that where road failures were observed, there would be urgent action taken in spite of any funding restrictions across the road network to decrease risk against life of motorists and drivers. The executive member offered assurances that the service areas was continuing to focus on those urgent emergency repairs as an absolute priority. A point was raised around the surface dressing roads and the impact to residents, properties and vehicles, with an added element of risk imposed to cyclists and motorists. Slab footways were noted as a risk, and we received assurances that the strategy was targeting funds towards overall improvements. Whilst the broad spending remained static, interventions were designed on a risk-based approach. Electric vehicle charging points was another part of the strategy that we discussed. Increased uptake of electric vehicles by residents posed a challenge in expediting the rollout of charging points before 2025. In overall, the committee was satisfied with the responses and actions to address our comments by officers and endorsed both reports. Further to that, we considered the hire bike scheme that was prior to a decision to tender for a bike hire scheme, the recommendations of which the committee supported unanimously. The decision was scheduled to be taken between the 25th of October and the 1st of November, and members were pleased with future plans for upgrading the current fleet of bicycles that was in line with the Council's priorities around sustainable travel in Lincoln. We were informed that new technology, geofencing, allowed for greater flexibility around spaces designated for beginning and ending a journey, whilst innovations were anticipated to provide greater encouragement for usage. We also suggested utilising the data around the existing client base to be used towards optimising service provision, taking into account the type of use, for example, commute or leisure, and hotspots of increased usage, such as close to the University of Lincoln and the train station, amongst others. In relation to costs, we heard that LCC would be subsidising the future bike share scheme, or the proposal was for LCC to subsidise the future bike share scheme. This direction followed a market engagement which indicated that offering a £1 per rental subsidy capped at an upper level of £25,000 to £35,000 was believed to be a positive enticement for potential operators and a way of incentivising them to maximise rentals and penalise for lack of effort to engage local residents. The cap is also providing LCC with assurance on a total amount of spending and removes the risk of having no limits to funding responsibility. And I can expand on that. At the moment, we get a usage of about 7,000 rentals per year. So to allow £1 a rental with £25,000 to £35,000 cap would allow for a significant increase in usage of the hire bike scheme. And so we thought that was a good idea to make sure that we know how much it's going to cost us, but at the same time allow scope for increase in usage of the scheme. In the same meeting, we also confirmed reports on highways services and transport services performance information for Q1 and received an annual report on Transport Connect service. On the latter, the Transport Connect service, we were joined by the Managing and Commercial Director of Transport Connect Limited, who offered assurances that the company was able to support Lincolnshire County Council with high quality, cost effective transport solutions while keeping in profit, which allowed to reinvest in new vehicles and technology to improve service provision. And I do think that it was a good move on by the council to create this arm's length company to help us with the special educational needs transport that we had at that time several years ago, and has been a boon to us over that time. Moving on to our planned future work, which can be found on pages 82 to 84 of the agenda pack, and following our committee meeting on Monday past, there is only one addition to the list of items to be programmes, and that is an item on permit schemes, street working and permit schemes. The report will include street works, road works and activities in Lincolnshire. I requested this report to be added to our list of future works in line with the report considered on the 20th of January 2020 that followed the third anniversary of the permit scheme. And also, I was aware of lots and lots of members having issues or issues raised with them about roadworks suddenly cropping up and blocking roads in the county. The way these tend at times to be with roads left closed when there's no work going on or when the work has been completed, and also at the front of that sometimes the road's closed off and no work has started. So that was the other thing in my mind, and I thought the Scrutiny Committee needed to have that report and have a look at how we handle the inspections, etc., of these sites once the permits have been issued. The next statutory audit this report is now scheduled for April 2023, so we'll be having a look at that in 3 or 4 months' time. In relation to the preparatory work around a future in-depth review of traffic management in Lincolnshire, I would like to make you aware that the membership of the working group has now been established. It's myself, Councillor Rob Gibson and Councillor Kevin Clark, and the officers Karen Cassar, Mick Phoenix, Jan Gibson, Claire Dixon and Kyra Nettle, with support from our scrutiny officer, Chiara. And we're due to hold our first meeting in November with a view of meeting up to 2 more times in the new year to formally set terms of reference and scope for the review. And I would just say we would be suggesting those the scope and terms of reference for the review, because I'm aware it's up to the scrutiny panel for them to decide how they want to review and what they want to review. So it'll be the working group suggesting the way for, the scope that we would think was the best way to go. Lastly, I would like to make you aware that the committee is scheduled to visit the Lincolnshire Lab on the Lincolnshire Labs on the 18th of November. This concludes my update to you and members of this board. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions, and there's usually a few on highway.
There should be, yeah, and thank you for the detailed report. I mean, I'm sure it's helpful to everybody. Yeah, okay, Councillor Strangle, yeah, Ian, sorry, yeah, Eddie, you're first.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mike, for your report. I notice on page 84, items to be scheduled, doesn't include my request on Monday's meeting of Highways, where I did ask about the progress on the winter impact, and I asked for whether that could be put into the schedule in January to tell us how it was performing, and in perhaps March, April time to actually have a wash-up, if you like, of how we have performed over the winter months. And as I said, of course, if we continue to have our tropical Lincolnshire, it may not be important at all. But I just thought that it'd be nice to know. And I think you agreed with me, Mike, that it used to be when we used to sit in Highways a few years ago, it was always included, but it doesn't seem to be there on the items to be scheduled or indeed the actual work programme as it stands. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, can I just, well, the thing is, Eddie, the Monday's meeting, the time between then and now, it's a bit short to have got that in the papers. What I probably omitted to do was just mention that that is suggested on Monday that be added to the programme, and apologies for that. But I can assure you that we will get that update in January, and it will be requested. And you're quite right, we used to always get a midwinter report in previous times, but it seems to have gone away at this point in time, but it'll be coming back. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Yep, Councillor Dilks.
Yeah, can I thank you, Councillor Brooks, for your report. I particularly welcome what you say about signage being left out either before or after roads works take place. Very timely. It happened this morning on the way here. I had to, within my own ward, actually, I saw it said road closed, and it was basically turn round and have another mile detour around. And I just took the risk and thought, well, no, I don't believe it. And I was right. There was no roadworks, but I had to drive. It was actually a manoeuvre. I had to sort of dodge round these signs that said road closed, definitely road closed. There was nothing there. So, people just sort of lose faith, don't they, and don't have confidence when that happens. I appreciate it. There may be good reasons for that one. I don't know what the specifics was. I haven't had a chance to report it, but I will do to the highways people. Likewise, there is sometimes an issue with picking up signage after it's been. And I offered, my own to the local highways engineer officer. That I didn't mind popping around and picking it up and dumping it in the parish council yard. And it was, no, don't do that, because of health and safety issues. But it's actually can cause health and safety issues, particularly to pedestrians and cyclists, motorcyclists, where it's just sort of dumped on the side of the road or in the hedge bottom, you know what I mean? So that there is a possible sort of issue there. The other issue related to that is, to me, that I've experienced is traffic lights actually arriving early and staying late at a cost to the council. At a financial cost to the council. It's been suggested to me. I haven't looked into it, but I can give you a specific instance of it, Mike. Outside the meeting. Of the traffic light staying a couple of days after the roadworks to repair a particular pothole actually left, and it was suggested how much it was going to cost, and I haven't actually looked into it, but I just wonder if that is a problem, Mike. Thank you.
These are the issues that we're looking to pick up and get some answers on when this does come to scrutiny, because it's exactly what I'm saying. Traffic lights appearing a couple of days before work starts, and they're still there after the work's finished, as well as all the signage and everything. Traffic lights if the council are doing the job and it's not a utility, I presume will be costing the council something as part of the highways contract. So, it's important that those incidents, if you notice them, are reported. But also, we'll have a look at that as well. I mean, we should behave in the way that we want the utilities to behave, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I've got a question, very simple one. I wondered if we've got what I'm going to call a strategy, but it doesn't have to be, but just a briefing paper on electric charging points. Because I'm getting more and more questions. I don't mean very big numbers, but half a dozen people have spoken to me about what is the council, city council, I'm using Lincoln here, together. Where do we stand on city centre, and city centre, I mean town centre, city centre, charging points in urban areas?
I mean, I haven't got an answer for you now, Chairman, on that, but it's certainly something we can take away and look at. We do get a lot of reports saying that there's efforts going on in getting EV charging points, but you're quite right, there needs to be some sort of cooperation between the districts who give planning permissions and the county council, who the highway authority, and quite how that is been coordinated. I can't give you the answer here, but Cara's asking to come.
Thank you very much indeed. Don't know if I'm going to rescue you or not. Just to make you aware, we do have a Lincolnshire electric vehicle strategy that is sitting under the local transport plan. So the 5th version that has been issued in the past year. So we do have one, and we will be receiving regular updates going forward.
And is it the sort of document that you could just pass on easily by email?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
And it would answer the question of, for example, somebody who said to me, I'd like an electric charging point here in the middle of Lincoln, okay, on my street. I'm not saying what the answer is, but it would be answered in that paper, would it?
Agreed. Yes, I will be circulating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just picking up on your point, it may be helpful to just make 2 points. One, in terms of the work programme at Environment and Economy, I mentioned earlier this business of power and looking into the supply of power, of energy supplies. One of the fundamental problems here is that fast charging does take quite a considerable amount of electrical supply at quite a considerably high level. Getting hold of that is not easy, and I'm sure that will be one of the subjects which is looked into by that item I referred to earlier. And a colleague mentioned planning consents. Again, it may be helpful to bear in mind that pretty well as of now, changes to the building regulations will mean that going forward, the provision of electrical vehicle charging points at new dwellings and many kinds of new commercial premises will become a mandatory. But of course, that's only looking at new build. What we need to see is a much wider provision. But I think it's going to prove to be quite a complicated thing. And the provision of energy at the right level in the right place is going to be one of the factors involved. Thank you, Chairman.
Good point. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Tom.
On your point, Chairman, and it may be of help, because I had a resident some time ago contact me on the issue of EV charging in Caister. I know from a county perspective there is work going on around our assets and our EV points and what we're doing with them, and I know that's taking longer than officers would like, but I do know that's been in play for a number of months from a county perspective, but obviously I can't speak for, in terms of what you were referring to, in terms of new consents for new ones in new places, but in terms of our assets, I know there's a big piece of work ongoing at the moment with officers about possible renewal and what we do around then.
Okay, thanks again. Right. So, anybody else want to ask any questions about Mike's report? No? Can we go to the, where are we? I think it's just to agree quite simply, yep. The board is asked to determine whether it's satisfied with the activity undertaken by A, the Environment and Economy Committee, Scrutiny Committees, and B, the Highway Scrutiny Committee, and are we satisfied with the planned work programme of both of them? I would say we are. I think we are. So can we have a vote on that proposition, please? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? No. Fine. So we've just got the overview and scrutiny management work programme, which here is to note. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for the attendance, particularly the reports given by Ian and Mike. Safe journey home, and see you this time next month. Thank you.